that. Good afternoon. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, there's still time to go back. And for those of you who do, I'm sorry. My name is Matt Curtin. I am the founder of InterHack, and I'm going to talk a little bit about forensic computer analysis, and I'm going to talk generally about forensic analysis and the presentation of scientific evidence. I'm going to look at it from the perspective of somebody who's challenging that work. So, I'm curious, before we get going, how many of you in your day jobs, or your night jobs, as the case may be, are involved in the creation or the collection or the analysis of electronic evidence that may be used in some kind of a proceeding? A bunch, okay. How many of you have been sorted to testify in a deposition? How many of you at trial? How many have seen things like the court documents that say scary things like motion in limine? Okay, I'm going to talk about some fun stuff here. All right, so if you have a question, feel free to pipe up. You can throw things at me. That sort of stuff is all fair game. Usually when I'm giving a talk, I'll get probably no more than 10 minutes into it before people feel the need to start hurling things at me for various reasons. If the kind of thing that I'm talking about sounds very interesting to you and you want to play at the grown-ups table, then we should talk, because I am desperate for people who can survive in this crazy environment that I call my office. All right. The kinds of things that we do are quite remarkably serious. This is an analyst at my firm who was given an award. And that award is what we call the verified kill. The verified kill and the associated skull pin that you get to wear that goes along with it is the result of encountering evidence that has been presented by somebody else, the analysis of which you have knocked out. So, in this particular case, we had an expert on the other side who had some things that he said, and Matt here had a look at it. He said, there's some problems here. Gave a line of questioning to counsel, filed some paperwork that identified some problems, and the judge ruled in a pre-trial hearing that one of his 4 opinions, his big money opinion, that this iPhone has been reset at this particular date after the fire, the judge said, you can't tell the jury that. That is not a scientifically defensible opinion. Sucks to be you. By the way, anybody know what happens if you have that kind of thing happen to you? You lose the case, get kicked off the case, you have to get the money back. If a court rules that you are offering an unreliable opinion, your career is over. Nobody hires you anymore to give them an opinion in that area. It's kind of a continuum, so it's not necessarily you never ever work as an expert again, but you may, in fact, have that kind of thing happen. The stakes are high, not only for the people who are involved in the litigation, but the people who are involved in the delivery of the evidence. So the question arises, what is an expert witness? It's important to understand that, because before we could talk about how we analyze evidence and how we present the data and all that kind of stuff, we need to understand the role that we play in this process. The role that we play as an expert witness is a relatively humble one. We don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Who matters in this will be the plaintiff who has some kind of a beef, the defendant who has a right to defend himself against this complaint. Their lawyers matter because it is the lawyers who are going to be making the arguments. The judge matters because the judge has to ensure that this judicial process is being administered fairly. The jurors matter because they're the ones who had to take a couple of weeks out of their lives to listen to all of this piffle and do their civic duty so that we have an option besides killing each other whenever there's a dispute that we can't resolve by arm wrestling. So our job as experts is a humble one. Our job is to help the people who matter do their job. That's all we do, is we help the people who matter in this process do their job properly. So we will apply technical expertise, experience, things that the lawyers say beyond the ken of the jury, that they have the ability to understand what all of that junk means. To be able to offer that opinion, there are several things that you need to have. This is the Federal Rule of Evidence 702. There is also an Ohio rule and all have their own rules of evidence and whatnot, but they all boil down to basically this four-prong test. And it's not that you get to choose which one of these. I'm going to handle this. I'm going to get in with option B. You have to do all of them. That is, that you have to have that kind of technical or scientific knowledge that is going to help the trier of fact, the juror, to understand what's going on with all of this stuff. You're going to have to base it upon sufficient facts or data. You can't pick two data points, call it a trend, and testify to it and say what's going to happen on your third data point. That no worky. That's the technical term. The other thing is that you have to have your testimony be the product of reliable principles. This is not the time to get experimental and innovative. If you're Galileo and you're saying that the sun is actually the center of the universe, the time to present that is at a technical conference, at a scientific research outlet, not in a trial. Finally, you have to apply those principles and methods reliably to the facts of this case. You don't get to go take a look at what's happening in general, and here's all the stuff that's generally happening out there, and somehow score some kind of points in this particular case. You have to talk about this case for that to be at all admissible. Everybody with me so far? All right, good. Now, I want to emphasize again the point about what we're doing being very important. It's not just a question of, keeping each other from getting killed and that sort of stuff. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about is criminal. We're talking about the government wanting to deprive someone of life or liberty. We have a document that defines how we are going to operate, and that includes a provision in this document. That provision is Amendment number 6. The 6th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States requires that when someone is accused, that he is afforded the right to be confronted by the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So if you go back to your office, and you fire up NCASE, and print out a report, who is the witness testifying against the accused? And by what process is the right of the accused, as articulated in the 6th Amendment, going to be afforded? It is ultimately the person. The person has to be able to meet that test. If you don't have the ability to meet that test in the rule of evidence, then you've got no business doing this. This is very, very serious stuff, as seen by some of these cases that we're working on. We see a lot of development as things get very, very important, and we have more and more information becoming increasingly sensitive, coming under attack from nation states and all of that sort of stuff. And every sheriff's office in the country wants to be SEAL Team 6. And they want to be the equivalent when it comes to the forensic stuff. So they go to their NCASE training or their FTK training, and they get their 20 hours of boot camp, and then they want to do a report. Well, okay. But we've got a process that we need to go through. That Sixth Amendment thing. A lot of prosecutors have a bit of an issue with that. It kind of gets in the way. Let's talk about why. Is that a good idea? Anybody remember the Casey Anthony trial? Casey Anthony trial we got to hear about nonstop. Why? Because Nancy Grace, from her bully pulpit at CNN, has decided that we've got somebody who's guilty. We've got ourselves a young mother who wants to be a party girl, and that daughter is kind of getting in her way of her lifestyle. So we're going to try her on TV, and we're going to convict her on TV. And that's how this is going to work. She was such a good prosecutor that she decided to be a TV host. This guy, Sergeant Kevin Stanger, Orange County, Florida Sheriff's Office. He was called as a witness for the state. He testified that in his examination of Casey Anthony's computer, he found that the term chloroform was searched for 84 times. Why is that important? How does that relate to the facts of the present case? How was it that the little girl was killed? Chloroform was involved. 84 times. If you're a juror and you have this horrific set of circumstances put in front of you, and that guy sits on the stand and says 84 times her computer had a search term, chloroform. Is that powerful to you? Does that mean something to you? This isn't just what's after the fact. It's not random once before the fact. 84 times. A fact repeated over and over again by the prosecutor. 84 times. The little problem with that. The guy who wrote the software the Sergeant Stanger used said 84 times is a lot. So he decided he'd better have a look at his software. Found a bug in his software. He said, holy moly, we got ourselves a problem. So he calls his client, Orange County Sheriff's Office. Hey guys, there's a bug in my software that you're using. Might want to fix it. What do? They ignore him. So he calls the prosecutor. Hey guys, you're seeking the death penalty here. Before you kill a citizen, maybe you want to get your facts straight. What do? Ignored him. So he calls the defense attorney. Hey guys, guess what? I'm real sorry, but there's a bug in my software and I'm trying to get the record cleared up. So, after having all this notice, the prosecution puts on Sergeant Stanger 84 times, they say. And what they don't realize is that the defense had been in touch with the guy who wrote the software, found the bug, fixed it, and got the right number. Anyone want to guess the right number? 1. That was important. Anybody remember the result? The verdict returned by the jury? Not guilty. Does that mean that she didn't do the thing? Not necessarily. The state failed to prove its case. Doing stupid stuff like this to try to get an advantage because you've got somebody that you're sure is guilty is not just corruption of the process. It ultimately is not going to get you the result that you're really looking for. Anybody know this lady, Annie Dukin, a chemist, Massachusetts State Crime Lab? She was every prosecutor's favorite, focused on drug cases. Anytime they needed somebody to come through, they gave her a call. Why? Because she was always able to make the connection that they needed. Why? Well, because she diddled the evidence. That's why. And we now have thousands of cases, thousands of convictions, which have to be reopened and reanalyzed because we've got somebody fooling around with the evidence so that we could get the conclusion that we wanted. That would be bad. Anybody heard about this elite team of forensic hair sample analysts at FBI? Between 1985 and 1999, 268 criminal cases across the country. The elite hair sample analysts at FBI came in to testify. In 257 of the 268, testified wrongly in favor of the defense. In favor of the prosecution, in favor of the state. You've got a state agency going through this process, using hair samples to tie people to the location of a crime. 32 defendants were sentenced to death. 14 were either executed or died in prison. Everybody all right with this? These people are dead. There's no unfrying them. That's how serious this stuff is. Well, that's not about computers. Well, I do computer stuff and I do death penalty cases. It is that serious. In one of the cases that we worked on, we were dealing with an iPhone. iPhones are all the rage now. Yesterday's news, good point. We're so past that. Oh boy. All right, back to the iPhone. So the deal is, anybody had to make an insurance claim lately? Car crash, fire, any of that kind of stuff? Did the insurance company ask for your phone? Wait for it. They're coming after your phone. The reason why is they want to know where you were. They want to know how fast you were going. They want to know who else you're talking to while your house is on fire. Because insurance companies are there to deny your claim for your convenience. It's like The Incredibles, you know. Bob, they're penetrating the bureaucracy. So we've got a case where we've got an insurer, and they want to deny somebody's claim to have their house that has burnt down taken care of because they had some guy look at the phone. Super duper forensicator 2015 opens the thing up, reads the data out, and this report, this god-awful report, has conclusions in it, one of which was the location services disabled before the loss and never re-enabled. The phone was reset after the loss. The owner selectively deleted data. We've got some stuff in here that has been chosen for deletion, and also there's an encrypted backup somewhere maybe that might have more information on it. If only we could get a hold of the putative encrypted backup that might exist. Now, when we start taking a look at this, what are some of the questions that come to your mind? I mean, if you're looking at this and you're thinking about, okay, somebody is trying to make a claim that their house has burnt down and they want to be paid for that, okay, well, it seems a reasonable enough thing to ask. Hey, by the way, did you set the fire yourself? If you've got evidence that somebody has in fact set the fire, that might be important. If somebody has tried to cover up such evidence, that also might be important. And clearly, this is the kind of thing the insurance company wants to find. Now, has anybody ever contracted to provide a service to an insurance company? Insurance companies, as you know, are always looking for the most optimal solution to their problem, whatever the cost, right? No, they are cheap as all get out. They will tell you if you have told them it's going to cost $10,000 for something, they're going to ask what you could do for a nickel. I can't take this phone call for a nickel, counsel. That's the kind of thing that you get into, which means that the entire stable of experts that have been lined up by the insurance company are probably doing so based on a low rate with the promise that, yeah, you might lose money on every deal, but we'll make up for it in volume. And this is where a lot of these guys get into this thing. So they start getting a lot of volume. They got high volume cases. They got to turn the stuff around. Boom, 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 boom. And you get stuff like this. Now, if this is something that you're interested in understanding, location services has been disabled before the fire, never to be re-enabled. If you're working for the other side, if you're working for the claimant, how are you going to address that kind of assertion? Are you just going to take their word for it? Call me a skeptical. But you might want to have a look at this. Riddle me this, Batman. How come when I start looking at the P-list data around here, I start finding that there are apps that record when they last looked at the location services? And why is it that there are timestamps in there after the loss? Could you answer that question for me? That would be really great. The fact is, when you offer an opinion within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that is the phrase that pays in this business. You have to meet that standard. If you cannot identify a simple null hypothesis and be sure that it's not blinking, then you might have a little bit of a problem, because I'm going to look for that kind of stuff. And in fact, we do look for that. In fact, did find it. The question of whether the phone was reset after the loss, you want to know the foundation for that one? Me too. If you needed to establish that with an iPhone, how might you go about doing that? Are there timestamps that you can find on the phone somewhere? Okay, wiped at 3 o'clock on the 15th. Well, there's no wipe log. What, with a cloth? There is, however, going to be a timestamp associated with records that you import into the phone. And in fact, after the loss, we found that there were a whole bunch of things in contacts that were all the same timestamp. So what do we have? Well, somebody loaded a bunch of contacts into the phone after the loss. And you want to go from there to the phone was wiped. Really? The owner selectively deleted data. This might be my favorite. So difficult with this case. With the iPhone, there is a notion of a serial number, right? Recorded with a picture. You take a picture, 106, 107, 108, 109, 114, 117, 132. Huh. We're missing a few. So clearly, if you've had a fire and you're missing a few photos in sequence, then you deleted pictures that you took of your house burning, right? That's the conclusion. But the owner selectively deleted data. Selectively. Does anybody use Celebrite to do this phone analysis? I mean, this is the great new tool. Everybody loves their Celebrate, right? Could you tell me which button on there tells you, selectively, what is the test used to establish whether something was deleted selectively? Or can you tell me why somebody chose to delete one thing but not another? Anybody ever taken a bad picture before? It might have been blurry. Oh, I got the thing upside down, my thumb was in the way. Any of that kind of stuff? Now, if you do have that problem, be sure to save all of them, because if ever one day you need to make an insurance claim, you don't want them to say, well, clearly, you deleted the evidence that you set your house on fire. That's what they were claiming. This is amazing. In this case, as you saw earlier, we had somebody do some work on this issue number 2, and in a pretrial motion, the judge tossed that, said, you can't say that to the jury. You're not allowed to ask the question, counsel, and you, Mr. Expert, are not allowed to say that. Do you read me? But the rest of these 3 things, they're still on the table. We're going to allow the jury to hear that, and then they can decide whether they're going to believe that or whether they're going to listen to Bowtie Boy. That's ultimately going to be a question for the jury. One of the things that we do in the process of preparing for trial is not only to help counsel figure out the line of question to ask us so that our story will get out there, but we also do work to figure out who's on the other side, what they're going to say, what their approach is, how they've testified in previous cases, where they've gone to school, all the training they've taken, everything that they've bunged up in the entire history of their existence. And we're going to put that into a machine, and it's going to spit out a line of questions. And these are not comfortable questions. The remaining 3 questions, the conclusions that were put up here, the opposing expert was allowed to say. Opposing counsel asked the questions, he pontificated, and then it was time for cross-examination. And in the cross-examination, we started taking a look at this business of the location services. And he presented, the defense attorney, the plaintiff's attorney who was suing the insurance company, presented an exhibit that showed the location services table and all the timestamps in it. Now, Mr. Expert, can you tell me what the date of the loss was? And can you tell me, in light of your opinion, that location services was disabled before the loss and never reactivated, how it is that the table looks like this? How does this get updated? Well, when it checks the location services, it saves it in the table. There, you can see it. Okay, fine. Now, how many of them are after the date of the loss? Can you count them for us? We can wait. That would be more than 0. So, riddle me this, Batman. How is it that we have these dates in here? Well, I guess the location services had to be reactivated. Location services had to be reactivated after the time of loss. So, in fact, your first opinion here would be wrong. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly? Yeah. Okay. Anyone can make a mistake. You've also said that somebody selectively deleted the data. Could you explain to me the test that you used to establish whether the data had been selectively deleted? And then what is the significance of that? Well, you'll notice that the gaps in the photos exist where we've got the old photo set stops before the loss, and then there's some photos that continue after the loss. So there were 5 photos taken in this period of time. between these two dates, 4 days apart? Yes. And which date were those taken on? Well, I don't know. It was between those 4 days. So the fire lasted for 5 hours, and you're saying that out of the whole thing, the significance is that it might have been the 5 hours where there's a fire. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Now, did you look at the rest of all the photos in here to see the sequence there? Well, no. All right, well, let me show you an exhibit. So we show the entire list of photos by number. How many do we have as part of the series? How many are skipped before the next series continues, and so on? Would you say that this period that you're looking at is consistent with the rest of the use of this phone over a period of 8 months? Yeah, it's consistent. So what is the significance of your conclusion that these photos were deleted when they were taken at this period of time? Well, I guess it doesn't have any significance. So anyone can make a mistake, and anyone can say something that has no significance. I understand. What about this encrypted backup? Have you seen an encrypted backup? No. Do you have any evidence that an encrypted backup actually exists? No. So, in fact, the probative value of this would be nothing. No further questions. This sounds great in a presentation, but I got to tell you, it is painful to watch. I can be a pretty mean guy, but it's really rough to watch somebody go through that, especially when I'm the one cranking the screws down on them. On the other hand, remember, we don't matter so much. Who matters? The woman whose house burned down. She had an insurance policy. And those knuckleheads used this to deny payment. So for the last year, while all this litigation is going on, she's living in a Motel 6 with her family. That's who matters in this thing. And that's the reason why, as much as I hate to do it, I will turn the screws down when it is necessary. Don't do that. All right, any questions on that one? All right, good. Tampering, obstruction, and falsehood. Oh my. In this case, we had a criminal case. Very, very high-profile criminal case. We had an elected official holding a press conference. We are going to put this guy away for 20 years. Why? Because we know that he was involved in the cover-up of this crime. We don't have any evidence directly showing that he was doing any cover-up, but it is necessary to note that over 2/3 of the unallocated clusters contained the hexadecimal value 00. That's what the forensic report says. It's hexadecimal 00? It's not regular 00? That sounds encrypted. So it does. In an interview transcript, we see one of the investigators getting a little flustered. Well, we can't get anything on this guy because anything that he's touched has been wiped. With a cloth? Elsewhere, in one of the reports, we see the contents of unallocated clusters were not consistent with wiping. Okie dokie. At least 1/3 of you raised your hands when we were asking who's involved in the analysis of data for this purpose. Can anybody tell me in a nutshell what the test that we would apply to data to establish whether the unallocated clusters had been wiped? What's the test for that? Might it be hexadecimal 00? This is interesting. This is a Mac. Do you know what happens on a Mac or any BSD system for that matter? You know, a proper computer. If you use RM with a dash capital P on it? Say again? It writes zeros. But not at first. It writes FF. And then it writes 00. And then it writes FF. And that's the state that it leaves it in. Anybody know what happens if you use the trash can thing on the Mac and do the secure delete that way? What remains of the clusters there? It leaves behind 00. Hexadecimal 00, no less. And now for the kicker. If you get a brand new hard drive and you never ever write something to it, do you know what's there? I'll give you a hint. There you go. There you go. Give the man a cookie. Hexadecimal 00, the dastardly value. Now you tell me. The fact that over 2/3 of the disk and unallocated clusters contain the hexadecimal value 00, what difference does that make? 0. Hexadecimal 00. That's good. Now, let us revisit the situation. We have a guy who is being tried in the press because we've got an elected official standing up in front of the world, and the whole world is watching this case. Songs are being written about this case. The TV is on and on about the case. Flippin' Rolling Stone, everybody's going on about this case. We're going to put this guy away for 20 years. What evidence do we have that he did any of the stuff that covered it up? Nothing. But how do we know that he did it? 2/3 of unallocated space is hexadecimal 00. We're going to put him away for 20 years because of that. Sounds good to me. This is a problem. I'm not okay with that. Nevertheless, this is the kind of thing that can happen. Now, does this mean that the analyst is running too far with the data? The analyst said only this. Another analyst actually said this about the unallocated clusters not consistent with wiping. But it is the prosecutor who read that and used it for foundation for what she wanted to see and was prepared to tell that to a jury until they got my report. And then things got ugly. Long and short of it is, rather than trying the case on the day they're supposed to pick a jury, they said, Your Honor, we would like to drop the charges as long as he'll quit his job. He's been on administrative leave for 1.5 years. He doesn't want to go back to that job. He doesn't have to plead guilty to anything. He doesn't have to give up any licenses. No. Just don't go back to that place. Okay. 20 years to that. Not good. All right. Last one, real quick. I got to 5 after, right? 5. Oh, all right. We're building up to a crescendo here. Once upon a time, there were naughty bits. You could procure naughty bits on peer-to-peer file sharing networks. The standard for being convicted of child pornography, if you're possessing or distributing, is you have to do it knowingly. With any criminal act, you must know what it is that you're doing. So, you get something like this, and the question becomes, all right, we've got some naughty bits on a computer here. How do we know that this was done knowingly? What we have is a report that came from an investigator poking around out there in the big scary internet. Big scary internet says, whoa, hey, we got some naughty bits over here. So they go and they serve a warrant on the phone company. Phone company says, well, there's where he lives. So, because computer guys are scary, they come beat the door down before dawn. They grab the computer and they present the files and evidence. Well, We need to establish that this guy knew what he was doing. How do we do that? Let's look for the terms that we have here. Underage, underage, underage. Must be searching for underage. And upon that foundation, they go forward. This guy is going to have to register as a sex offender for 30 years because he's got pictures of somebody underage. Now, it comes to us. We take a look at it. What's going on here? I want to know what the complete set is. I want to see everything. I want to understand what you're talking about. Hey, look at that. Underage. Sure enough, it's there. Underage. Sure enough, it's there. And it's there. We do, in fact, have 3 files that say underage in them. Isn't that interesting? However, if we take a look at the rest of the files, we see the word porn, 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 porn. You tell me, is the search term more likely underage or more likely porn? In this case, Perry County, Ohio, we've got to explain to a jury there how peer-to-peer file sharing works. 28-count felony indictment. 10 get tossed by the judge before trial starts. We've got another 9 that we're dealing with as the state's putting on its evidence. And then after that, the judge has a look at some of the stuff and says, you have not met the threshold here. It's out of here. So now we're down to 9 counts. And there I am on the stand using the state's own exhibit to apply their own method to the complete set of data instead of the small set that they selected for themselves. Not guilty. I don't think the guy did it, for what it's worth. This is a computer that was in the middle of a house. The whole family lived there. A bunch of people would come over to the house regularly. And in fact, when we take a look at the timestamps associated with it, all those downloads are at the same time, connected with a single session. So, what do we learn from all of this? When we are putting together forensic evidence, we have to understand that it is imperative for us to meet a proper standard for the stuff to be used against somebody else. Because the Sixth Amendment requires that the stuff get confronted. And there is exposure that we have individually as analysts. Our careers literally can be over anytime we get up on the stand. Common mistakes and things that you can watch out for when you're doing your own work. Number 1 is not accounting for the alternative theory. If you haven't actually thought about what else could explain the data here, and do we have a better explanation, then you've not done your work. Your job is not to listen to somebody else's idea and then to go about proving it. Your job is to develop a hypothesis. And then what do you do next? You develop null hypotheses. The things that will disprove what your hypothesis is, and you test for that. When you have tried everything that you can think of, everything that the literature articulates, and that theory still holds, then you've got something that you can go with. The next is not applying any kind of a test, not bothering to articulate how you tell the difference between an X and a Y. Selectively deleted. Give me a break. Selection bias. You choose the files that you want. You ignore everything else. This is cherry picking this stuff. And what happens when you're looking for something? You find it. But if you don't see all the other stuff, you're blind. And as a consequence, you wind up getting confirmation bias to play into it. And I just knew it. I just knew he was a naughty boy. And ultimately, that's sloppy work. In that trial in Perry County, The defense attorney made me answer the question when talking about the state's experts. Was this confirmation bias? Was this selection bias? Or was this just careless? I like the guys on the other side of this thing. I mean, I got a professional working relationship. I mean, they're good guys. They screwed up, but they're good guys. Well, it was careless. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Mr. Curtin. Could you say that again? No joke. Careless. Not guilty. That's how that stuff happens. So as you are going about the process, always remember, important, always remember your role in this process. Never forget the stakes. Apply these 5 lessons from seeing these mistakes, and you should be able to do well. Thank you.